up song by song.
Another Lover.
Another Lover is one of the first songs that we started playing with My Black Ram.
It's a song that for me as a songwriter started off with the chord progression.
Peter's electric guitar and the piano chords echoing it.
I imagine that guitar riff in my mind, this call and response thing happening.
It's a part that is simple, but it took a couple of recording sessions to get a line that really worked, but also to play it in a way that was convincing and aggressive and matched the intensity of the guitar part.
So that became the main riff of the song, and that figures many times throughout the tune. Jason's doing some really interesting things on the drums.
So as Peter's saying, there's a call and response between the guitar and the piano. And I really play that up by matching my kick drum with the guitar and my snare with the piano.
It's a straightforward rhythm, but at the same time it's complex.
So what you get is kick, kick, snare, snare, kick, snare, snare, then a turn around. Kick, snare, snare, kick, snare, snare, then a turn around.
It's one of the things that I listen to most in the song. All the instruments are going, and yet through it all, what I'm listening to is Jason's drums.
So during the verses, I keep it understated. I have a way of never laying it out on the wood.
The bass in the verses is played kind of choppy, just along with the kick drum. As it gets closer to the chorus part, kind of smooths out the bass line.
From a musical standpoint, aside from the main riff, which is that call and response, I think that John really gives it some interesting flavors.
Another Lover is probably the most Elvis Costello song on the album.
He gives it that Elvis Costello organ throughout the verses. That becomes another signature line throughout the entire song that I keep coming back to.
I remember at the time I was eager to distinguish my keyboard sound from Sleepy Driver, that standard Americana sound of piano and Hammond organ and Fender Rhodes. I wanted to bring in something that wouldn't have worked at all in a Sleepy Driver song. And so I thought, how about a transistor organ? It sounds a bit toy-like today, but in the 60s and 70s it was a real staple of pop and rock music, especially music with a psychedelic flair. A lot of the big bands were using it. Beatles, for example, in Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Pink Floyd, The Doors, Led Zeppelin, Talking Heads, Blondie, Elton John in Crocodile Rock. It's a kind of sound that invites you to play in a completely different way than, say, a Hammond organ. So that organ line that you hear in the verses is almost something that you would hear in a carnival setting. It's almost joke-like, but it gives the song an entirely different flavor. The line that you hear on the recorded version of the album is almost exactly what I played the first run through.
Then the middle of the tune is, I remember taking it in for mastering to Brad Perry and Evan Hansen up at the Recordery. This section in the middle of the tune, they said, was the loudest part on the album. And it's kind of one of those anti-solo things again. It's kind of a musical bridge rather than a solo section. Just plays a heavy riff on the guitar and allows the keyboards to really wind it up with an organ sound. And during the last verse, we break it down. We take it down to the drums and we take it down to a synth part, and that's where we bring in the hand claps.
I love those hand claps.
The one component that wasn't there originally is the bass line that you hear by itself at the beginning of the third verse. In the recording session, I had only played the right hand line, and I remember asking Peter after we had laid down that track, I wonder if I should add the bass line, and I just played the bass line at that moment. And we both looked at each other and said, hey, that's pretty cool. Let's add that in and we'll find a way to use it.
The third verse was originally bass and drums and vocals, and then we just pulled out the bass. So to this day, I still have a problem not playing the bass in that part live.
I don't need another love.
One of the interesting things about this tune as well is that throughout the bulk of the recording, I did my own background vocals. And I don't know, maybe sometimes I fall into the trap of doing the most obvious thing from a background vocal standpoint. Jason was listening to the playback of the tunes and had my background vocals in there, and he said, you know what? Let me have a go at it. So he came down, and what you hear on the recording is Jason's background vocals. So much like the drums, he's doing something that I wouldn't have thought of, but there it is. It just worked like a charm.
When we were mixing the album, I would take Prince of the mixes and listen to them in my car with my 3-year-olds in the back seat. One day my daughter asked me to play A Rubber Lover song. I immediately responded with, "Sorry dear, that's a completely different song." Watch for A Rubber Lover by Weird Al, spring 2020.